teachers have read it. Why are you choosing the quiet kid over the kid with a raised hand? I had a maths teacher at high school who had a knack for spotting when a kid might know the answer but was too shy to raise their hand. So he'd scan the room and pick on the one who looked like they might know the answer. I was smart at school, but so painfully shy, and he helped my confidence so much. The ones that intentionally pick on the quiet/awkward ones can get ducked though. I still remember my German teacher shouting at me in German to close the window the day after the class learned the word for window when I'd been sick. This may be the only time defenestration is somewhat relevant. This story triggered my memory of that word. You're welcome. Drat. I was going to make a joke about defenestration. I guess that's out the window now. I never call on a student who doesn't have their hand up. If I want a quiet student to be more involved, it's usually in smaller group settings where they're working on questions with their peers. If I'm telling them to share their answers after, I might go up to one of my quieter students and say, "Hey Jesse, can you share the answer to number 5 when we discuss the assignment later as a class?" A lot of kids have really bad anxiety, and giving them that heads up helps. Calling their name when their hand isn't up doesn't help, and it's not actually engagement if they either A, get embarrassed because they don't know the answer, or B, know the answer but didn't want to speak up in the first place. You are an amazing teacher for having this insight. It's called cold calling. It can work well if you know your students. You aren't going to call on the student whom you know will have a breakdown. It can redirect students' focus back to the lesson. Some students do not pay attention because they know they won't be called on if their hand isn't up. Quite often there is something in the school reports that relate to interacting with the class. This gives students the opportunity to. I've added the phone a friend option to cold calling. If they don't know the answer, they can ask someone with their hand up. Then the original student has to paraphrase the answer and add something. Sometimes I'll do a think pair share and cold call during the share. The students know they could be called on, so they do discuss with their partner. The point of asking students to speak in class is more than just looking to confirm an answer, it's trying to get kids to talk. I prefer first having kids talk to each other, then asking, "Hey Fred, what did your group talk about?" This gives Fred a safer environment to speak because he doesn't have to take full ownership over what was said. Also, while kids are talking about the answer, I can listen in on Fred's group and make sure it's an idea worth bringing up, which can help give Fred and his group confidence. I should also add, my main goal in class isn't getting kids to talk to me, or even to speak in front of the whole class, but to get kids to talk to each other. Yes, all of this. Teaching is so much more complex than just asking questions. You give me answers. Imagine if Professor Sprout only ever called on Hermione because her hand was raised. Neville might never have realized his innate herbology skills. It's a type of formative assessment. You try your best to get all students to answer questions to test knowledge. The kid with their hand up usually does it regularly, and more often than not they know the answer, so you need to involve others that don't get involved enough. That's why I love whiteboards. Everyone has to answer, not just the kids that always raise their hand. And kids are allowed to hold up a blank board if they don't know. Plikers are great for these formative assessments as well. One school I was at had these really glossy pages at the back of the student diary/planner, so it could be used in class as a little whiteboard. I thought it was great. Plus it encouraged kids to remember their planners because they knew they were likely to use them in class. To try to get them involved and raise their confidence, I only choose the shy kids if I know they know the answer. For example, if they've been doing individual work, we'll often go through them afterwards, especially questions that some of the students struggled with. I walk around the class while they're doing individual work anyway, so I know who managed which questions, and if I know one of the shy kids got a particular one right, I might say, "Andy, would you like to show us how you did question 5? Another reason is, if one of the not so shy kids is chatting or seems distracted, I'll ask them a direct question to try to re-engage them in the class. However, again, I'll make sure it's something well within their capabilities. I think only calling on students you expect to have a correct answer perpetuates the idea that making mistakes is unacceptable. There are students who want to share and students who don't. whether or not they have the correct answer. Having students share incorrect answers sometimes is the best thing to create an environment for discussion. Incorrect answers are a learning opportunity. While I agree with the premise of what you're saying, I should explain that I teach older teenagers with behavioral issues. Some of my students can feel very humiliated if they get an answer wrong in front of their classmates. More confident students might raise their hands and try, even if they get it wrong, and that's great. But for others, this could destroy their confidence. I've had students refuse to do any work after getting something wrong as they are too embarrassed about their classmates seeing them struggle. One time in particular, it took weeks before a certain student would participate in class at all because he insisted that maths wasn't for him after he struggled with one task. During that time, not only did he refuse to engage, but he was actively disruptive as well. I guess it might depend on your context, though. If you work with younger kids or higher attaining / more motivated kids, it might be different. Because the kid with the raised hand already answered the last 8 questions, and I heard the quiet kid say the answer under their breath, or saw they wrote it correctly and want to give them a chance to shine. As the former quiet kid, we don't want a chance to shine. Most of us just wanted to be left alone so we could get through the day and not have to be there anymore. Calling out the quiet kids doesn't make them more social. It makes them resent you and makes them hate being there even more than normal. I understand where you're coming from, but I was also a quiet / shy / worried / wants to make a good impression, but is very weird kid, and I desperately wanted to shine. I truly appreciated the teachers who validated me, and that made me more earnest, assertive, and willing to participate in class. Different strokes for different blokes, as they say. It's also dependent on how the teacher does this as well. As someone higher up pointed out, I have fair sticks in my classroom, with all my students' numbers on them. When we're answering a lot of very similar questions, I'll pull those. It keeps kids engaged because they don't know when their name will be chosen, and it lets me see which students are getting the subject and which aren't. I try to be as respectful as possible, and if a kid really doesn't know or is struggling, I'll pull another / get a kid with their hand up to help out. But having one student answer every question all day is annoying. My English class last year did that. We called them the stick of fate. You need to assess comprehension and learning as you teach. Doesn't matter if you think you're giving the best lesson ever if the kids aren't learning from it. So, I don't care that the kid with their hand raised knows the answer. Probably they do, since they're raising their hand. I care if the majority of the class knows the answer, including and especially the quiet kid. As a person who was absurdly shy in school as a child, the only way to overcome that is continued exposure. If you let the quiet kids sit there and never speak, then they will continue to do that, maybe forever, and that has repercussions for their future. What if they have a brilliant idea at a work meeting, too afraid to speak up, and get passed over for promotion? Teachers shouldn't pick on quiet kids to be mean, but periodically do it to help them grow. I was so shy they put me in special classes to help overcome it. It did not work. It wasn't until my late 30s that I decided to speak up more. I've been both of those kids. Educators need to find better ways of engaging all the students than bringing the class attention to the one kid who doesn't want any of it for whatever reason that may be. Personally, I warn my students before, say, watching a short 4-minute video, and tell individual students or a disruptive desk group I will be asking them a question. Then they don't poop themselves on the spot and pay attention. They also give way better responses. I was that quiet kid who usually knew the answer but hated talking in class. I hated participation marks and only felt comfortable once I got to university and got to have smaller seminars with 10 to 15 people. I never liked it. I never did it unless I was forced to, and I did well all through school and have multiple degrees. So no. Forcing kids to participate so they get over their dislike / anxiety of class participation is not necessary to success. Yes, but as a teacher myself, I believe in holistic learning. Every single student has different backgrounds and unique experiences that form their worldview. A quiet student's opinion or viewpoint might impact other students' way of thinking on a certain subject. This is also coming from someone who was a very shy and introverted high school student. In a normal classroom situation, I do not ask students who did not raise their hands to answer a question. I simply analyze if they do so out of embarrassment, ignorance or interest, and I try to advance on that point so that in the future they want to participate. However, this year in Argentina all the classes have been by video call and I need them to participate and evaluate them in class. However, to those students who seem shy to participate, I ask them about opinions or a critical look on the subject studied and not so much on concepts and questions that may have a bad answer. Sorry for my English. Don't apologize for your English. It was just fine. I'm a student teacher for a scholarship, not training to become a teacher, and I only recently, this is my 3rd semester teaching, started calling kids who haven't raised their hands, because I've spent the best part of 12 weeks being entirely ignored by students and I know they almost all know the answer. I have one student per class who is always willing to put their hand up and get the answer right. I have about 80% of students who almost always answer correctly if I ask them personally, and do occasionally answer if I ask the class, and the rest of them, about 1 or 2 per class, who just outright do not listen to what I teach. I'm just tired of being ignored, so by letting them know I'm not afraid to ask them by name hopefully helps them realize they need to start taking notes about what I tell them. Write their name on paddle pop /ice lolly /popsicle sticks and put them in a bag. Draw from it randomly and tell them that is what you're going to do. They'll start listening because they have no idea who is going to get called upon. It's a bit better than just calling on a kid because it's not your choice. It's not going to impact your relationship with the students because they'll see it as fairer than you picking them out. I guarantee you that teachers that do this were extroverted in school. I'm extremely introverted, and I call on kids that aren't dying to give me the answer. I do it sensitively, and I know my students pretty well because I ask a lot of questions and listen to them. My classroom isn't an environment where we are all waiting on someone to mess up. We talk to each other and encourage each other, and a lot of times kids just say they don't know and it's fine. We move on, or we tell them where to find an answer. The really quiet kids I usually don't call on until the end of the 2nd quarter when I know them pretty well. Sounds like you had some scrap teachers. I'm sorry. I remember once in elementary school when a shy girl got to pick someone. She always did a shy elbow on the desk, hands up. So I did the same when she was picking, rather than the normal arm straight up, other hand behind the back supporting it. And it ended up with her picking me. I feel like I learned more in that day of school than in any other. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.